So, Harold, I'm so happy to talk to you about this because I remember when your 4x6 index card came out, and I definitely had some questions. But before we get to those questions, you wrote this book with Helene Olin, who I've also had the opportunity to interview, about the financial advisory industry, and I think that's I'm also being, I think, polite, as she has a fairly jaundiced view of it. But tell us what that index card was and where it came from.
So I interviewed Helene when she wrote her earlier book, which was called Pound Foolish. And in the course of the conversation, I asked her, I said, isn't the fundamental dilemma that faces the financial advice industry that the best advice is available for free at the library, and it would basically fit on an index card? And therefore, any advice that you pay for is very likely to be, at best, overpriced and often wrong. And I was speaking metaphorically, but I started getting all these emails from people saying, okay, well, where's the index card? And so I was kind of stuck. So I just grabbed one of my daughter's 4x6 index cards that she was using in high school, and I just scribbled down in maybe 2 minutes, nine things for people to pay attention to. And I took a picture with my iPhone, and it got hundreds of thousands of hits around the internet. It was on the Washington Post. There were all sorts of websites, Life Hacker and Boing Boing and all this that really grabbed onto it, and there was something about it that took this really complicated and forbidding subject. I have to understand all these things about my retirement savings and mutual funds and whatever. To reduce it down to I have to understand these things that are on this card seemed to be very helpful for people. And it's kind of funny. It actually was named one of Money Magazine's best new ideas of the year, which is sort of hilarious because if you look at the principles, there are things like, pay off your credit card and things like that. There's nothing on there that, that was sort of, wow, this came out, where did this come from? It's all very commonsensical kind of stuff.
Well, I have to say, speaking for myself, I find the whole subject of personal finances, of retirement, on a personal level, and you of course talk about and write and research and academically study sort of retirement on a massive scale in terms of public policy. But when it comes to that financial stuff, I think it's very intimidating for people, and I think one of the things that's brilliant about it is that there is sort of a validation that it actually can be this simple. Now, with that said, and I will compliment you also, because I'm looking at a picture of that card right now, and you don't have to. You didn't cross anything out. Now, maybe this is the second one you did, but I'll take your word for it that it was the first draft. But so it turns out it takes a little bit more than an index card. Or in the book, you basically just explain each one of those rules. And so obviously we're not going to go through each one of them. Yeah. But you did make some tweaks to the original rules, and that one was. You had saved 20% of your money in the card, and you switched that a little bit. What was behind that switch?
Yeah, so, I got a lot of emails and comments. I remember there was a comment on Reddit where this woman said, Dear Professor Pollack, I'm a 28-year-old single mom, and you just told me to save 20% of my income, blank you. And I get that. That 20% number is really hard for a lot of people. I think that's a really good goal, and I think that's appropriate, actually, certainly for someone in my circumstance, with a good job. If you look at what you need to save to maintain your retirement, living more or less the way you're living while you're working, 20% is about the right number. But I didn't want to demoralize people. And it's funny, Helene and I had a lot of conversations about this, in part because I'm more puritanical than she is. I drive this old junky professor car with dents on it, et cetera. And it just seems that for a lot of people that that the important thing is to pay off your credit card and to start saving and to build up a reserve. And 20% is a great goal, but there are people who are just going to give up if I tell them that's where you have to start.
And that's a big part of it too, isn't it? Is that there's a certain amount of like, I guess, behavioral economics involved in this, and that in the same way that people will I don't know, start a diet or do anything else that they need to do long term. And I imagine one of the big challenges too is that it's very hard for people to project out, 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years. If you're a 20-year-old starting out, when you start talking about retirement, you're talking about something that is twice your age away from you.
Yep. No, and I was the same as anybody else. Until about at age 40, I basically violated, most of the rules on this card. And I remember when I was 22, I had my first job, and they handed me the boring paperwork for my 401k, and I sort of stuffed it in the drawer and never really looked at it again. And I think the Dow Jones Industrials was about 1/10 what it is now, something like that. And, boy, I would wish I could get that time back. The thing that's so important for younger people to understand is you need to make compound interest your friend in that. This is a great, when you're in your 20s, that's the time when you really want to start saving because, first of all, you don't have kids yet probably, so you're able to save a little more than you might in a few years, but you just have decades for that investment to kind of compound on itself, and it makes just an incredible difference if you start early. Now, I also think it's important for people to understand, don't despair and don't give up. I didn't really do any of this until I was about 40, and it takes several years before you can really see a difference, but you will. And it really, if you're methodical about it, it really will make a big difference. And the earlier you start, the better.
And what do you say if you're talking to somebody who's 50? And they haven't been doing a great job of these things? What are is there a priority to some of these rules where it's it would be great if you could do all 9 or 9.5, but if you can't do those, these are the first ones to tackle.
So, the first thing you want to do is look at your credit cards, because every dollar that you spend on your credit card, you're getting a guaranteed tax-free, zero-risk return of like 15%, depending on what your credit card is. And there's no investment. If you're not named Warren Buffett, there's just no investment that comes close to that. So the first thing you want to do is get hold of your credit card debt. The second thing you want to do is build up a little bit of a strategic reserve so that you can get out of the game of managing your cash flow. One of the most difficult things that a lot of people face, and I remember as a young, father supporting a family with childcare expenses and so on, when you're in the game of like trying to manage your day-to-day cash flow and like wondering if checks are going to bounce or whatever, you can't do any planning. You're basically just totally reactive, and all the evidence is that's when you make a bunch of stupid decisions because they help you solve short-term problems. And
right.
Everybody knows that you shouldn't put more money on your credit card, that you shouldn't go to a payday lender, all this kind of stuff. People do it because they're in a jam and they need to solve an immediate problem. I think that after that, I think the key thing is to make it automatic. You really want money put right into your 401k. If you have an employer who offers that, certainly try to put in as much as you can. Your employer often puts in something to help match it, and that's free money to you. You don't have to think about it. It's just taken right out of your paycheck off the top. And, that's how I do almost all my saving, is just directly that way. I find if I don't get my hot little hands on it, it's a lot easier to save, and there's a lot of tax advantages to doing that.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you a specific question about 401ks, and then I want to talk about one of the last points on your index card, and it's something that actually, there's 2 points I want to talk about. One, something that people might not know about financial advisors, and two, why you think it's important for people to support a retirement safety in a broader societal way. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Harold Pollack after this. So, Harold, when we broke, you were telling us about the book that you wrote with Helene Olin entitled "The Index Card." It's obviously more than an index card, but it emanated from an index card where you put down 9 rules in which to help make sure that you, not just you, but you and everyone can live a safe and secure financially safe and secure retirement. So, all right, one question for you. You talk about how you can have multiple 401ks. People now, they switch jobs, and largely speaking, we know that 401ks have been, at least on a public policy level, a bit of an experiment that has gone awry or has not achieved what it's supposed to be. But people have different 401ks out there. What do people do when they do that? I mean, how do people manage that? And what do you say to people who are like, I have no idea what to do with my 401k. I just get the document and I can't get past that document.
Yeah. Well, I get that. Well, first of all, if you leave a job, there's actually no reason why you have to do anything to your 401k at your old job. If it's well invested, sensibly, you can just leave it there. There's a ton of ads on TV that talk about how you can roll it over and do all sorts of stuff. Much of the time, the absolute best thing you can do is nothing, and just leave it. Let it continue doing what it's doing. What you actually should invest your retirement savings in, ironically, is very simple. Really, you want to buy low-fee index funds, and a mix so that as you get older, there's a little bit less in stocks and a little bit more in bonds, but you don't have to own a lot of crazy stuff. And if you're being sensible about it, you change jobs, you can pretty much just leave it. And I think the important thing with your 401k is to pay attention to the fees and just buy one of these really low fee stock or bond index funds. Vanguard sells them, other companies sell them. You shouldn't really be paying more than like 0.2% or 0.3% in
I guess
fees.
what I'm asking is even something even more rudimentary than that. Yeah. I mean, when people look at that, they get that paper and they say, okay, I've got this money in my 401k. I want to put it just in one of these low fee funds. How do they go about doing that?
Well, usually you can just get right on the internet and if your employer offers a 401k through any of the major firms, they have nice websites, and usually it takes very little time. If you're able to get on the website and navigate around the Huffington Post, you can basically navigate around the Fidelity or the Vanguard website. But you really want to look and pay attention to the fees that that you might be paying there, and don't be intimidated about it. The irony is, like, everything that's complicated about investments, where you actually put the money, you can just ignore all that. Anything that's trying to tell you really should invest in health stocks or Google's really going to do it, you just ignore all that stuff, and that frees up some brain space to say, okay, how can I basically buy some just well-diversified and cheap index fund through whatever my employer is offering? And then when you get on their website, it just eliminates a lot of complexity because they have 9,000 funds, of which 8,990 are basically irrelevant because they're sort of screwing around trying to time the market or something like that, or pick a particular sector. It's actually extremely valuable to know that you can ignore most of the cacophony out there so that you can just focus on a few things. If you're really feeling very intimidated, one thing you could do, although I'm not a huge fan of this, but I think it serves a real value, you can just put all your money into one of these target date funds. If you if you really like, I just want to own one thing and not worry about it. Just figure out your 65th birthday, go to something like Vanguard and just say, okay, do you have a target date fund that's 2035 or something, and then they just take care of everything. It's not actually what I would. There are reasons why it's not the totally perfect thing, but if you're like, I want to just be able to fire and forget it, and I'm just going to own one thing in my retirement, that works pretty well. And
all right.
I don't know if that helps.
I suspect it does. And all right, so I want to just hit one more point that
sure.
You say on the last point on your card, promote social insurance programs to help people when things go wrong.
Yes.
Explain that. I mean, how is that about your own financial security?
Yeah, I got so much pushback on that. A bunch of people said, I love your card, but then you got all political. And I think there's two things about that. One is that it's honest to my own story because I save a lot of money. I save 25% of my income probably every year, which is a lot. I would be bankrupt if it weren't for Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security because I take care of someone who's disabled. And we just my wife and I, we need these programs. And I think it'd be dishonest of me to claim that you can, do all these wonderful things, without that government foundation. We have to protect each other because we all face these risks in life that would just crush any one of us if we had to face it alone. And that's really what social insurance is about. And so all the things that you can do a great job on your 401k and all those other things, you still need that backup of social insurance. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that, and because we really all rely on it much more than we realize. And certainly in my case, it turned out to really be the difference between my family, being in really serious trouble and being able to have a pretty nice life because these programs were there to protect us when we really needed it.
That's beautifully put, Harold. The book is The Index Card. People can find it anywhere that books are sold. Thanks so much, Harold. Really appreciate your time today.
Great to talk to you.